In the last 24 hours alone, the battlefield between Iran, Israel, and the United States has shifted in ways that should make every thinking person stop and ask, what is actually going on here? Let's start with what happened in Bahrain. Iran launched a direct strike on a U.S. naval base. The footage spread across social media within minutes, people screaming, alarms blaring, and for the first time in a long time, the world saw something it didn't expect: Iran hitting back hard, fast, and without hesitation. But that's not even the most significant development. 3 U.S. fighter jets went down in Kuwait. 3! And the official explanation coming out of CENTCOM is that these were friendly fire incidents. Now, pause on that for a moment. Friendly fire? 1 jet, maybe. 2 jets, that's a serious operational failure. But 3 jets, all going down in the same engagement, all labeled friendly fire? Military aviation experts will tell you there is a system built specifically to prevent this. It's called IFF, Identification Friend or Foe. Every aircraft carries it. Every base uses it. It tells you in real time which planes are yours and which aren't. For 3 separate aircraft to go down under friendly fire, that IFF system would have to fail catastrophically 3 times in a row. That doesn't happen by accident. So what did happen? There's a theory circulating, and it's worth examining seriously, that China may have provided Iran with advanced jamming technology capable of disrupting the radar systems on US F-35s, specifically the AN-APG-81 radar suite. If that radar is jammed or spoofed, the pilot loses situational awareness, and if the base loses its IFF signal, you have the conditions for exactly what we saw. Is this confirmed? No, but it is entirely plausible, and it aligns with reports that Iran may have already received the HQ-9 missile system, China's advanced surface-to-air platform, following procurement discussions that reportedly began in mid-2025. The fog of war is real. Information that comes out of a battlefield in real time is almost always incomplete and often deliberately misleading. We won't know the full picture for weeks, maybe months, but here's what we do know. Iran's response was not the response of a nation that just lost its supreme leader and is in collapse. It was the response of a nation that decided, we have nothing left to lose, so we're going to make you feel it. That decision to decentralize command is one of the least discussed but most consequential changes Iran has made. What this means is that small units on the ground at the operational level no longer have to wait for orders from Tehran. They have standing authorization to engage based on pre-established policy. This makes Iran tactically unpredictable in a way it has never been before. You can't decapitate a decentralized command structure. There's no single point of failure anymore. And here's where a retired Indian general, of all people, actually said something worth hearing. He referenced Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not to celebrate them, but to make a strategic point. When the US dropped those bombs in 1945, they didn't drop them on Tokyo, the seat of power. They targeted secondary cities deliberately to leave the Japanese leadership intact enough to negotiate. The point was not just to destroy, it was to create conditions for surrender. What happened in Iran was the opposite. 30 bombs on the compound of Supreme Leader Khamenei. The man himself killed, his daughter, his son-in-law, his grandchild, 47 senior officials who were part of the decision-making apparatus gone. When you eliminate everyone capable of negotiating, you don't end a war, you guarantee its escalation. You remove the very people who could have sat across the table from you. What fills that vacuum is not moderation, it's fury. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israel has resumed strikes on Hezbollah positions, and in Saudi Arabia, critical Aramco oil infrastructure was targeted. Iran denied responsibility, which, if true, raises an even more troubling question. Who did it, and why? Because Mossad agents were reportedly arrested in Saudi Arabia recently, caught in what appears to have been an operation designed to drag Riyadh into a direct conflict with Iran. Think about what that means. Israel's intelligence service operating inside a country that is nominally not at war with Israel, attempting to engineer a war between 2 Muslim nations. This is not new, it's a very old playbook, but it's being executed right now in real time. Now, let's talk about the United States, because there are two moments from the past 48 hours that deserve your full attention.
The first is a clip from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at a press conference. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, "We did not start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it." He did not start this war. That sentence should stop you cold, because the United States flew the planes. The United States dropped the bombs on Iran. The United States conducted what it called a preemptive strike. And the Secretary of Defense, in front of cameras, in front of the world, said, "We didn't start it." That's not a slip. That's a narrative. It's being constructed deliberately for a domestic audience, so that when the consequences come, and they are coming, the American public will believe they were defending themselves. Then there's the second moment. Hegseth, at the same press conference, said Islam cannot have nuclear weapons. It's common sense. 3 words in response to that. How dare you? Not because the statement is surprising, it's not, but because it reveals the framework through which this entire conflict is being understood inside the current US administration. It's not about national security, it's not about non-proliferation, it's about religion. It's about who is allowed to have power and who is not, and the who is being defined in theological terms. Which brings us to something even more important, something most analysts are afraid to say out loud. Tucker Carlson sat down with Mike Huckabee, the US ambassador to Israel, and Huckabee, in plain language, on camera, explained his vision for the region. He talked about the covenant in Genesis, the land promised to Abraham, and he described the borders of that promised land as stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Let that landmass sink in. That's not just Gaza. That's not just the West Bank. That includes Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, parts of Turkey, parts of Egypt. That is the land map of what is being called by the US ambassador to Israel the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This is what Professor Jeffrey Sachs and analysts like Professor Xiang-Ji Qin, a Chinese-Canadian geopolitical historian who has written for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, have been saying for months. This is not a geopolitical war in the conventional sense. This is an eschatological war, a war being fought over end times belief systems, a war being driven, at least in part, by people who believe they are enacting a divine script. Professor Ji Qin identifies 3 reasons this war is happening. The first is hubris, arrogance. The success of operations like the Maduro arrest in Venezuela gave certain decision-makers in Washington the impression that similar operations could be replicated anywhere, including in one of the most geographically and militarily complex nations in the Middle East. Iran is not Venezuela, but arrogance doesn't do geography. The Titanic didn't sink because of bad engineering. It sank because the captain was standing on an unsinkable ship. The second reason is personal benefit, financial and political. There are reported financial commitments, billions in private equity, political donations in the hundreds of millions, linking the people funding this administration to the outcomes of this war. When that much money is tied to a specific result, strategic interest starts to look a lot like a personal invoice. And the third reason, the one that matters most for understanding where this is going, is the eschatological framework. Professor Ji Qin points to what he calls secret societies operating at the highest levels of Western power. He names 3 branches: the Jesuits, who exercise influence over the Vatican; the Sabbatine Frankists, who he argues shape Israeli state policy; and the Freemasons, who he says control the national security apparatus of the United States. Whether you accept these labels or not, the underlying point stands. The people making the decisions that are dragging the world toward war are not the people you see on television. They are people who believe, genuinely, deeply believe, that they are building toward an end times outcome, that this war is not just political strategy, it's prophecy fulfillment. And here's the uncomfortable truth about Iran that nobody in Western media will say plainly.
The specific reason Iran is targeted persistently, obsessively, across multiple administrations is not its nuclear program. It's not its ballistic missiles. It's because in 1983, Iran made 3 decisions that the architects of the global financial system cannot tolerate. They banned usury, interest-based banking at the state level. They banned alcohol, and they implemented Islamic dress code as law. Iran said, our society will be organized on a different set of values, and the system said, we cannot allow that to stand. Because if one nation can say no to interest-based finance and survive, and Iran has under decades of the most brutal sanctions in modern history, then other nations might ask why they can't do the same. That's the real threat, not the centrifuges, the defiance. And the last thing I want to say, because sometimes you need to step back from the weight of all of this, the United States currently holds the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council, and Donald Trump's nominee to represent America at the world's most powerful diplomatic body this month is Melania Trump. I'll let you sit with that. A. Arnold Toynbee once said, "No one has ever gone broke by underestimating the intelligence of the American people." He didn't say that to be cruel. He said it as a warning about what happens when a democracy stops demanding that its leaders be serious, about what fills the vacuum when seriousness leaves the room. That vacuum is being filled right now, with bombs, with lies dressed up as liberation, with prophecy dressed up as policy. The war you're watching is not what they're telling you it is. The faces you see are not the ones making the decisions, and the stakes for every human being on this planet are higher than any news ticker will ever tell you. Stay informed, stay critical, and don't mistake the stage for the theater.